On the 26th of February 2015, the speedrunner 𝐃𝐞𝐬𝐫𝐢𝐩𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧 set a new world record in the master category of Super Monkey Ball. This record was the first improvement the category had seen in almost 3 years, beating a time of 16:09 set by Claris in mid-2012, a run which is still considered to be legendary in the eyes of many older community members. Not only was this new world record the first of many to be set by Callum, but also the first in history to break the 16-minute barrier with a time of 15:57, a very impressive feat given the strategies known at the time, and especially so considering it included a death on the unforgiving floor Master 9. Over the next 2.5 years, Callum would continue working hard to improve the record in this category, slowly chipping away at his times until finally he reached his long-term goal in November 2017, achieving a time of 15 minutes and 8 seconds. Now, if any of you are lucky enough to have seen my world record history and progression video from last year, this is the point where that video ends. Callum's 15:08 was an almost flawless speedrun, with incredible execution and very few notable mistakes. At the time I made that video, I was convinced this record would stand as number 1 for many years to come. But of course, this is 𝐃𝐿UMBAL we're talking about, and his recent return in September of this year not only proved me wrong, but also made him the first and only person to achieve a time under 15 minutes in Master, surpassing arguably the biggest milestone since breaking the 16-minute barrier over 4 years ago. In this video, we'll take a close look at the steps Callum took to bring his world record from a 15:08 down to a 14:56. I suppose you could consider this video as a world record progression update, so if you haven't already seen that, I'd recommend doing so to get an understanding of the complete timeline. When I became a part of the Monkey Ball community in early 2014, I can remember first looking at the leaderboard for Master and seeing over a 2-minute time difference between first and third place. At this point, Super Monkey Ball was still predominantly a race game, meaning most speedruns were performed whilst competing in real-time races using the website Speedruns Live. Few players were actually making the effort to grind out serious attempts and contest Claris's 16:09. And it seemed unlikely that anyone would take the record from her. However, unlikely does not mean impossible. Despite the huge gap between first and third place, the time difference between first and second was a mere 4 seconds. This second place time was of course held by fellow Australian speedrunner who lives just 15 minutes down the road, 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐻𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵, and if anyone was up to setting a new world record, it would undoubtedly be him. Sadly for 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵, as fate would have it, this never happened, and I'd put it down to 2 main reasons. The first of which being his infrequent streams and attempts, mostly due to PC issues he was having at the time, as well as his growing interest for other games. The second, and more important of the two, being his decision to not include strategies which require pause buffering to be feasible. For anyone unfamiliar, pause buffering is a strategy which involves the player pausing the game on specific frames of gameplay in order to perform frame-perfect tricks on floors which would otherwise be impractical. The frames on which the player needs to pause the game to perform these strategies are commonly referred to as pause frames within the community. I've mentioned before how at the time 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵 achieved his 16:13, a pause strategy was known on Master 7 that had the potential to save around 12 seconds, and his decision to not include it cost him the world record. 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐵 did eventually go on to beat Claris's time with a pause-free run of his own in 2018, making him the first and still only person to have beaten her time and achieve a sub-16-minute run without the use of pausing. Pause buffering was, and still is, a highly controversial strategy within the Monkey Ball community, ever since it was officially discovered in mid-2002. It was banned from individual level speedruns, or ILs, almost immediately, after players were disgusted by how easy it made some of the most difficult stages in the game. With a community not forming around real-time speedruns of full categories until a number of years later, pause buffering had never been officially banned from these, though it was broadly looked down upon by many players who considered it an unskillful method of saving time, especially with the current world record not making use of the technique. The general opposition to pause buffering resulted in no players doing much work to find potential applications of the strategy, However, soon after Callum picked up Super Monkey Ball in 2015, this would all change, and his decision to use pause strategies to his advantage led to huge innovation of the speedrun, allowing for times like his 15:08 and coveted 14:56 to become obtainable. Even today, it's typically older community members who've been around longer than Callum who don't favour the use of pausing in RTA, whereas new players, especially in the past few years, don't seem to mind. Now don't get me wrong, pause buffering is far from the sole reason behind Callum's crazy records. In fact, in his 15:08, about 31 seconds of time save over Clarissa's 16:09 was from movement optimisations and new non-pause strategies alone. Now before we delve into Callum's new records, let's quickly take a look back at his long-standing time of 15:08 and the obvious improvements he could make right out of the gate. When this record was set, Callum made use of all the fastest RTA viable strategies he could, and in addition to being deathless, execution throughout the run was near flawless, with only two noteworthy exceptions. The first of which was, as Callum put it, a really stupid slow floor 18. Toward the end of the floor, Callum got an unwanted high clip from the goal platform when leaving the swing bar, costing him just over a second. The other bad point was missing the strategy on floor 50. Despite hitting the goalpost, he managed to stay alive and complete the stage normally, though the error cost him an additional 4 seconds. This meant a potential 5 seconds of time save were up for grabs by improving upon these two mistakes alone. As a matter of fact, Callum stated the mistake on floor 50 was one of his main incentives to improve his personal best, as it never left him 100% satisfied with his run. The remainder of his motivation came from the discovery of a number of new strategies found after he achieved his time. Expert 6 was the first floor to fall victim, with 2 sets of pause frames being found that could save about 0.7 seconds over Callum's PB. The old strategy on this floor was one that had been in use since 2012, and the pause frames would emulate something a lot closer to the time IL of the floor, effortlessly skipping over the moving squares on a path straight to the goal. Next up was Expert 7, with 2 new sets of pause frames to assist in getting a clip over from the starting platform to a later part of the stage. The floor 7 clip is another strategy that had been in use for years, though a set of frames on this floor would not only vastly improve the consistency of such a difficult time save, but could also shave off a further 0.3 seconds. Another set of frames was found for floor 17, allowing the player to utilise the bumper to clip over the walls and take a straight path to the goal. Previously, the player would have to slalom between walls and avoid getting hit by the bumpers to make their way to the finish. The new pause frames could save about a full second here. Pause frames on floor 36 resulted in the biggest potential improvement of about 3.8 seconds. Like with Expert 6, the set of frames here emulated a similar strategy to that used in an IL, making use of the bumpers to gain immense height and speed and cleanly skip over the stage. Though this was the biggest potential time save, it was also the most difficult of the new strategies, as it required hitting at least 5 frames to pull off, the first 3 of which being frame perfect with no backup. For a successful execution, the player would have to start the stage by holding up, then pause at 29.71. After getting this frame, switch to up right and pause again at 29.16. Switch to up left and pause at 28.65. These first 3 frames are crucial to hit, as failing to pause at these times would make the strategy impossible and result in almost certain death. Bear in mind, Super Monkey Ball runs at 60 frames per second, so managing to pause on all 3 of these frames is far from a mindless task. The last new find was on floor 48, with 3 sets of pause frames being found, once again recreating a similar strategy to the IL, clipping the monkey over the wall between the start of the stage and the goal, and saving a further 2.2 seconds. The combined potential time save of the newfound pause strategies totals to about 8 seconds flat, with a further 5 seconds available by improving upon the errors on floors 18 and 50. So, with this arsenal of new strategies, alongside unperturbed determination to achieve the sub-15 dream, it was only a matter of time before Callum would make it happen. On the 8th of September, Callum would achieve a time of 15:16 in Master, just 8 seconds shy of his personal best, with 3 deaths. Don't forget, the 15:08 was a deathless run. 2 days later, he managed a 15:13 with 2 deaths, and just 3 days following this, he would achieve his first PB in almost 2 years. He broke the goal tape on Master 10 with a time of 15:01, another deathless world record and improvement by 7 seconds. The run was not completely devoid of errors, however, and had noticeably slow execution of pause buffers, as well as small mistakes such as on floor 22 and missing the new pause frames on floor 48. Just 2 seconds shy of breaking the 15-minute barrier, there weren't an open holy hell that Callum would stop here, and he had zero hesitation in continuing the grind. Then, on the 15th of September, Callum would write Super Monkey Ball history once again.
9 Donna style first pop, treble 19, double 12! Dave Running, say it, cause I'm gobsmacked! I am gobsmacked! Say it, Dave!
Bang! For the second time, Callum had done what was once thought to be impossible, surpassing another huge milestone in Super Monkey Ball speedrunning. His 14:56 was near perfect, performing each new strategy and improving upon his previous mistakes with prestigious execution. I spoke with Callum on Discord about his new world record, and he shared with me his motivation for improvement and thoughts on his latest time.
All of my drive is for self-improvement, and to give the game I like so much an amazing speedrun. It's not really about beating anyone else, because I already did all that 4 years ago. Now it's just between me and the game, which is what I like best. Although, my PB feels more beatable than before to me now, maybe because there's been lots of extra little things found since then. When I did that run, it felt untouchable indefinitely, but now there's more ways to get there. I'd make sure that I'd improve my time before anyone else would, though.
Whoa, hold your horses, Callum. What do you mean your PB feels even more beatable than before? There's been lots of extra little things found. That's not what I thought. Well, the book does not close here, as not even a month after obtaining his new world record, Callum strapped on his frame-finding braces, and so far, with the work of other players, has conceived new pause strategies on 8 floors, making the possibility of a time in the 1440s more plausible than ever. It's important to note here that Monkey Ball has a significant community of Japanese speedrunners, and Callum attributes the discovery of many of these new strategies to the ideas presented by Japanese players, in particular Haruki, who, as shown by this spreadsheet, has contributed to finding optimizations on a large number of floors. Since the world record, pause strategies have been found on Expert 11, 24, 26, 32, 38, 45, as well as on Master 2 and 4. According to Callum, about 11 more seconds can be knocked off the record, with all these small time saves being performed quickly, taking it down to a 14:45. It's only a matter of time before Callum decides to return to attempts and make use of the new findings, but for now the 14:56 may be here to stay for a long time indeed. Thanks so much for watching everyone, cheers.